Hello, and welcome back to Conversations with Karen and Kat, the podcast where we connect with powerful change makers, visionaries, and everyday heroes who are shaping culture and community. Subscribe to Conversations with Karen and Kat on YouTube, Facebook, and IG, and wherever you get your podcasts. Today's guest is no stranger to Conversations with Karen and Kat. Welcome back, John.
Thank you.
Moye.
Hey, Kat. Hey, Karen. How y'all
Thank you
doing?
so much.
Thank you.
Brief intro. John is the director of the Office of Policy and Legislative Affairs at the Urban League of Greater Atlanta. He has more than 2 decades of experience in public service and nonprofit leadership. He's dedicated his career to advancing economic opportunity, workforce development, civil rights, and equitable public policy. So, John.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot has gone on since we last talked to you in 2024 on this program.
A lot.
As someone who's worked in this public space that you have been in, local government, nonprofit leadership, what is your view on the current political climate in Georgia when it comes to race, representation, and public policy? I know that's a lot. But just the first things off the top of your head when it comes to our current political climate, and we'll just take it at race and representation.
The first thing that comes to mind is that we're in a state of emergency, that the state of our union is weak and teetering.
Yeah.
And that on the 250th anniversary of the Republic, there are a lot of things that are certainly in question. And we have, as Americans, we have a lot of work to do if we're able to continue this journey, certainly for our children and our grandchildren. So it's an emergency.
You know, what can we tell our listeners? I don't want to assume everybody's up to speed on what's been going on.
Yes, ma'am.
So, brother, can you break down what happened in Louisiana? What did the Louisiana case, what did it really change, and what does it mean for everyday voters?
The bottom line is that the Supreme Court, over a period of time, has been weakening the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So I'll give you a quick tour very quickly. As we all know, we had a little thing called a civil war in this country. Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And in addition to strengthen that, they codified the Emancipation Proclamation with the 14th, and some would argue with the 15th Amendment. But even with that, it was another 100 years where there was poll taxes and people counting jelly beans and a lot of obstruction in terms of our people being able to vote. And so Dr. King and a whole host of others had been trying for quite some time, but finally, President Lyndon Johnson in Texas had the political capital and the courage to pass the Civil Rights Voting Rights Act of 1965, which strengthened our ability to be able to vote. Not impeded by poll tax and people being asked to do all kinds of crazy things and voter intimidation, and that's held. And as a result of that, we've been able to vote and to be able to expand Black power. I argue that without the Voting Rights Act, I don't know if he would have had a Barack Obama. I'm not so sure. To be very clear. So over time, particularly Justice Roberts, some would argue that Justice Roberts has made a career, over the last 40 years. One of his sole purposes was to eliminate it. So they've done it over a period of time. But the final death knell was this last week in Louisiana versus Cali in this case. And what the Supreme Court basically did was, Section 202 was really the provision in the Voting Rights Act, which really gave us protection. If there was any injustices, if we thought there was some gerrymandering, really egregious gerrymandering, we could go to the Justice Department to appeal for help and push back on, particularly in southern states, to do it. Well, now that's all gone. In a 6-3 decision, I think what broke all of our hearts is that Justice Clarence Thomas from Pinpoint, Georgia, was a part of the majority. If you read Justice Kagan and Sotomayor and certainly Justice Jackson, I mean, you could feel it coming off the pages. I would encourage everybody to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, there are no protections. And so as soon as the Supreme Court issued is ruling, Louisiana has already made a move to do redistricting. There's a fight right now in the state of Tennessee. They're going to eliminate a minority congressional seat. So there will literally be no representation for people of color in the state of Tennessee. Absolutely none. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, here in the state of Georgia, the governor announced a few weeks ago that he's going to convene a special session of the state legislature on June 17th.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things, but one of the purposes will clearly be for redistricting. So right now in the state of Georgia, we have 5 people of color who represents congressional districts. I really think, me personally, although I don't have the data to support it, I really think we should have 6, probably down in Savannah and coastal Georgia. I really believe that when you take a look at the numbers in Savannah. But right now you have Nikema Williams in the mighty 5th, Hank Johnson, David Scott, who unfortunately was my congressman who passed away a couple of weeks ago, Lucy Macbeth, who's been challenged on, and Sanford Bishop. And so all of those seats right now are in jeopardy as far as I'm concerned, because they're going to redraw those lines and we may lose, who knows, 1, 2, who knows, maybe 3 seats. I don't know. But that's a problem. And that's why Cali, and it's not just here, they're anticipating.
It's all over the southern states. All over the southern states.
But it's federal, and it's not just federal, it's state, it's House senators, it's county commissioners. It's going to trickle down. And here's the other piece to it, not just that. On the last day of session, I was actually at the Capitol. The state legislature passed House Bill 369. And in short, they've targeted 5 counties, including Gwinnett.
5 only out of 159 counties in the state.
159.
So now it's all nonpartisan, and he signed it. We made a huge a rally. We've organized with our leaders, NAACP, ACLU, Legal Defense Fund, a whole host of other organizations, and we pushed back hard. But the governor signed it anyway. So now, right now, it's if you walk into a voting booth, we're not taking a position on political parties. We don't do that at the Urban League. We just want to make sure that people are informed. So right now, you don't know if a person is a Republican, is a Democrat, or an independent. You have no idea who you're voting for. You just have no idea, and so we think that's a problem. But the governor signed it.
What this means is that they want to take the DA, make it only in these 5 counties.
That's right.
The district attorney's office, which are in these 5 counties are all Black females.
That's right.
So the district attorney, they want to make that nonpartisan.
That's right.
Have been partisan, and it'll be partisan in all of the other counties except for DeKalb, Cobb, Fulton, Gwinnett, and Clayton. Yeah, those 5.
Yep.
Which happened to be
minority majority counties.
Mm-hmm.
So it is they want to move DA, solicitor. Who else? They want to move them to
county commissioners too. Don't forget that.
Commissioners, and they want to move it, and they also want to move it to May when they're having nonpartisan elections.
It's outrageous. It is.
But go ahead.
And my thing is, if you're going to do that, then you do it across the state.
Of course you do.
Because there is something in our Constitution called equal protection. So you cannot treat similarly situated people differently. So what that means is you have a rule. It has to be a rule for everyone applied across the board.
That's right.
So you cannot make rules specifically for these 5 majority Black counties that do not apply across the state. So you either have it for all 150, 160, or none.
That's right.
So
I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
And we know. I had an opportunity to stand with Lisa Cupid, last week, who's the chair, I believe, it's been a long day, I believe over in Cobb County with her solicitor. We had a wonderful press conference. And, the solicitor was, who's a pretty savvy lawyer, like, this is illegal.
It
There's no
absolutely
standing
is.
for this whatsoever. So I'm not really sure, why. I know why they did what they did. I'm not so sure why
You know
he's
why.
with the law.
You
But
know.
it is what it is. And so, listen, whether it's local or federal, we're in for a fight this year. It's going to be a fight. But I am hopeful. When you take a look at what happened on Tuesday, we'll get to that later. But people responded in kind on Tuesday, I think, to the nonsense.
And why?
I would like. Go
Another
ahead, Pam. Go ahead.
Going back to the overturning of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. As soon as that was overturned by the Supreme Court, as John said, states went right. The governors had already started enacting legislation. They'd already pushed through, signed legislation that would take away, that would change voting maps. And one of the thing that about Louisiana, which is so egregious. It's egregious that they did it this quickly and without any sort of insight or any type of public involvement. They did that, but then the Louisiana governor wants to make it effective this election, and people had already voted, doing early voting. And so basically what he's saying is, the votes that you've already cast, I don't care about those votes. I don't care about you, because these votes are going, so your vote that you've already cast will not count for this election, because they're going to redraw the maps, and those maps will be effective for this election, for elections that people have already voted for the people that they wanted.
It's outrageous.
So I want to scream to everyone who say elections don't matter.
Oh boy. Every
election matters, because as we see, it's going to have a consequence. It's having consequences in impacting our lives. Because if these maps get redrawn in your states, that's about money coming back to your district.
Amen.
Because if you now have someone who's representing your district who doesn't care about a certain segment of his or her.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Of their district, of their constituency.
That's right.
You're not going to get resources
at all
that you are entitled to for your community. And I don't think folks have said enough about it. Go ahead, Karen.
That's one of the questions you jumped in, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask, and I want y'all to really drive it home.
Yeah.
Does this ruling, right? Does this allow partisan politics to become a cover for racial discrimination?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No question about it.
They're going to they are redrawing these maps to dilute Black political power.
Bottom line.
The language says, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, does it say that the ruling now means we have to prove racism in drawing the lines, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty high bar.
Race out of it.
So that is, so it basically, somebody has to come on there and say, we don't want Black people to have the right to vote. Well, they're not going to say that.
Absolutely.
They're not going to say that. But what they'll do is they'll put this very weird shaped district that has no cohesiveness to the map at all, putting people's interests together that, this is not a community that is going to vote together, that has any interest. And so they'll put a majority white district with a few Black people, so they can show that they've got Black people on this map.
They say they got a couple of them. They say they right.
But they'll make it statistically impossible for a Black person or a person of color to be elected. And so what they're saying is, like, all parties do this. All parties draw maps that favor their party, right? But It just so happens that the majority of African Americans vote Democratic, right? So when you're diluting the Democratic vote, you're diluting the Black vote. And that's the guise that it will be under. That they're intentionally, trying to draw these maps because they want to maintain power. This is about power.
They do. And just as a caveat, obviously, the Urban League, or certainly the National Urban League, we certainly can't delve in terms of any party politics. But for us, we do believe that the redrawing of these maps certainly disenfranchises the communities, certainly that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, it's just, and it's been reported that about in the South, we're going to lose about 200 elected officials. 200. Mm-hmm. That's real power. That's real money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
there will be no congressional Black caucus because there won't be any members left.
It'll be decimated.
Can y'all elaborate on the difference? Because I'm hearing so many comments on just talking to people in the community, and it's not driving home what this means. Like, oh, you still get to vote. Like, but can you elaborate the difference between access to a ballot and equitable political power when they dilute it and take all of our votes away and we no longer are represented? What does that look like in terms of access to a good quality of life and how that will materialize in everyday people's lives?
I'll give you one example here in Gwinnett County as someone who's lived in Gwinnett
for over 20 years.
Gwinnett County for over 20 years. When I first came into this county, there weren't a lot of Black and brown people in the district in the district that I was in for my county seat, for my district commissioner. And so we had someone who was representing this district, and they drew the map because this was a Republican district. So this was a Republican stronghold for many years. And they drew the maps so that it was very long. It went from the north end of the county all the way down to the south end of the county.
It did.
And because of that, and this was District Commission 2, and because of that, a Republican had always had this seat. And that person no longer represented the interest of the southern end of the county. And the only way he got out was because the county changed, the demographics changed.
Yes.
And so it became inevitable that a Democrat was going to get that seat, only because the demographics changed, not because the counties changed the map, because the demographics changed. You then had Black and brown people on the north end. You had Democratic people who were moving on the north end of the county through the central part of the county. That's what changed. So imagine if the demographics never change, that seat would never change. So that's what's going to happen at the state legislatures. They will draw these districts where there will be a spackle of Black and brown, or what they think will be Democrats, right? So that they can have majority Republican districts. And we know in Georgia what that translates to.
Right. Because representation means not only someone who looks like you, right, but can actually contribute to your cultural experiences and can be relatable. And
because we're not going to make the mistake that just because someone looks like you that they're going to vote in your interest.
No,
right?
You shouldn't do that. Right. I agree.
And so I don't want that to be. I want to be very clear. I don't want that to be the takeaway. Just because someone looks like you does not mean that they're going to be voting in your interest at either the county seat, the state capitol, or in Washington.
That's right. And the irony of it all, if you take a look, we were at the Urban League, we were very involved in the 2020 census, which seems like yesterday now. But the demographics are changing. Would you believe that we know that Gwinnett County soon will eclipse that of Fulton County in terms of population. Gwinnett County will be the most populous county in the state of Georgia. Don't take it from John. That's from the Census Bureau. This was back in 2020 in terms of the projections. The population is a third of the population in Georgia. 1/3 or more, about 33%, are people are African Americans. We have one of the highest concentrations of probably. I think Mississippi probably has the largest probably in the country. We have huge. So I don't understand. And then if you tack on other emerging groups like our Latino brothers and sisters and Asian Americans, I mean, it is clear to us that the so-called minorities are now in the majority. So I don't know how that's gonna pan out. Just based on pure numbers, I don't see how they do it, but they're going to do it.
So they'll end up like coming up with weird contortions to take like slivers of the minority population of maybe like Gwinnett County and tearing it like Walton County, or they're going to come up with some weird maps that don't make any sort of any sense as far as boundaries and communities having similar interests. So that those interests could be represented either at the county seat, the state seat, or in Washington.
And if you take a look at Athens, for example, I mean, the way Athens was sliced and diced, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Athens has a population, but they just sliced it up like it was like an apple in terms of, if you take a look at the lines currently right now. And so it's just another way of diluting political power. But it ain't over. We still have some tools in the toolbox.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those tools. Because more than anything, what I want to take away from this show is, what can I do? What can the listener, what can our
show up, do? Understand that you are in a participatory democracy, that you have to do your homework as a citizen, and that you have to vote. Let me say this in a nonpartisan way. If you take a look at the results of the 2024 election, the Democratic nominee for president only lost Georgia by 100,000 votes. I'm just saying factual. I'm not making a judgment on either candidate. I'm just saying, if you take a look at the Democratic candidate for president that year, that person only lost Georgia literally by 100,000 votes, 100,000 and change.
That's less than 1,000 people per county.
You could find that in Lawrenceville on a Saturday.
Yes.
So I'm just saying that in many instances, elections are very tight. 10 votes, 15 votes, 20 votes, and so I mean, this stuff is real. It's for real. And so I'm kind of happy. If you take a look, I think we broke records this week in terms of people coming out to vote. Broke records, and
some history was made too.
So I'm hopeful about that. Yeah. This week.
When have we ever? Let's back up. Keisha Lance Bottoms is the Democratic nominee for the gubernatorial race for Democrats. And then we have a brown woman in the runoff for lieutenant governor. Right? We have an Asian woman, and then also for Secretary of Agriculture, an African American female who now has a Democratic nomination. So yes, some history was absolutely
and Secretary of State, if I might add.
Secretary of State, absolutely,
yes.
So
that's right.
Some history has been made, and we got to come back for runoffs, people. You got to come back for the runoffs.
You do.
So we have a chance to do some things, and why it's important that we flip or get as much flipped as we can is so that we can get these maps changed. John's nonpartisan. He can't say that. I can say it. I'm a Democrat. I ain't got no problem saying that. And I want everybody Democratic to win. Everybody that's a Democrat with the big D, I want them to win.
But listen, sis. So we know we want to get smart people in office. John, Karen, we got to give people marching orders, because I hear we gotta vote, and yes, we know that. But what is the thing that is not allowing us to go to the polls? We are still in the districts that I know I live in Gwinnett. We're like 2/3 the vote, or a third the vote population, and we don't vote. The last election in the district, 93, 94, 95 of Gwinnett County. And between those three counties, just in the early voting, which those counties overlap, some of Gwinnett, some of DeKalb, we outnumber DeKalb by registration, but DeKalb County had a higher turnout. So when you see stats where we have the numbers and you can make things happen, we don't show up. And if this is crucial, where the voting is being diluted, and that term means we lessen our power, if these things are now happening, and the other stuff didn't happen, Mr. Floyd assassinated, what is that thing that's going to take us without us basically losing our lives to get people to get out to the polls?
I think is messaging, and I just want to share with you all. This week I was invited to meet with two sets of young voters, African Americans, voters, male and female, between the ages of 19 and 22, 23. And I made it my business to listen. And when I tell you that was an eye-opener, listening to these kids of home, in the heart of Atlanta, not too far, not a stone's throw from Mercedes-Benz. And with the exception, out of about 40 or 50 kids, only two students agreed that they thought voting, thought voting was a good thing. The others had completely checked out. They said it wasn't a dime's worth of difference between whoever wanted, whichever political party won. It wasn't reflective. They were completely dismayed by what's going on in our national politics. Taking a look what's going on. They didn't believe, they didn't see, there were questions about the future. There were questions about messaging that mature people don't talk to them. They're not listening to turning on NBC or CBS or ABC or looking at CNN. They don't get their information from there. This has been a game changer, particularly for young people.
Yeah.
This is where they get their information, TikTok, Instagram, and other emerging platforms. But I wasn't so much discouraged. I realized, I said, I just have to and I listened. I actively listened to them. And in the end, I think some of them turned around, but they believe that the system is gamed.
Yeah.
And that it's not, it doesn't serve them one way or the other. And I don't think it's just young people that feel that way. I think many people feel that way. And but you have to, it's messaging. You have to talk to folks. And you do. And they have to see that there's something in it for them. If they don't feel like it's in it for them, and I don't think we as leaders have made a compelling argument. Yes, Dr. King marched. Yes, the civil rights movement. Yes, we stand on the shoulders of greats. But times are moving, things are shifting, and we have to make a compelling argument of why, once again, it's in people's best interest to vote in their best interest.
Yeah. And all we can do is try and educate, right?
Yes.
I can bring you
to the water.
Amen.
I can't make you get in.
Can't.
And there's so much information. You reference, this is something I always say. I tell my kids, I said, this little thing right here, y'all have literally the world at your fingertips.
Amen. We do.
When I wanted to get information on a subject, I had some year-old encyclopedias that we had at our house, and every year we had the 1980 World Book Encyclopedia, and every year we would get the update. We would get an update.
You take me way back, Karen. You take me way back. Amen.
And because my mother was so proud when she finished paying those things off. But you had to wait for the yearly update. So when we did book reports, we used the encyclopedia, right? As a place to start. We go to the library. I had to leave my house to get.
You went to the what?
You
went to the what? You went to the what?
To the library.
To the what?
Right.
You mean with a card catalog?
Yes. With the card catalog, Dewey Decimal System. But
right.
I had to go and seek out information. These kids have information available right here. And I've said to my kids, we had less access, less information, but we knew more.
We did.
We knew more. And something, I grew up in a household where my father, up until who passed a few days shy of his 90th birthday, read 2 papers every day up until a month before he passed. Read 2 papers every day. My father didn't get to go to college. He went to Edward Waters College and came home from Jacksonville and went to the military.
Amen.
He didn't go to college, but that man was the smartest man I knew.
Amen.
Because he read the paper and he was up on current events. These kids, if the TikTok is longer than 30 seconds, they're swiping. They're swiping. And this is by design. All of this is by design.
It is by design.
Our kids are on the computers at school, right? And I was just listening to this study. This woman was talking about, I think it might have been on NPR, but she was talking about the fact that our kids have all of this access to information and this knowledge, but they're spending so many hours on the computer. In countries where kids spend 5 or more hours a day on the computer for learning purposes, their scores are going down versus in other countries, in communities where the kids do not spend as much time or get that much learning time on the computer. So they're on the computer, but they're not gaining knowledge. They're not gaining critical thinking. So it's no wonder that when they're given information, they're not really processing it to understand this is impacting me. And so I'll have to find that study. But it's something that we instinctually knew that the generations are actually like this Gen Z generation, because they're the first ones growing up with like computer access from the time they were born. They actually are not doing as well as we have in the past, Gen X's and above, and millennials, educationally, right? Because of the way that they're being taught. So
and there's no critical thinking. You do know that, right?
Yeah. There's no critical thinking.
No, zero.
Go ahead.
At my church, we had a forum that was called Media, Faith, and Fear. And one of the guest speakers, I go to Gwinnett Berean Christian Church, and one of our guest speakers is a therapist. And Karen, to your point, she even said as far as young as 2 years of age, 2 years of age and older should not have all these devices. And she gave a lot of information about the negative impact the science was showing on young people. And it was a very good segment she was speaking to. It just, I was like, "Ooh, you need to come on our show." So, somewhere along the way, the more we try to make things better, it seems like each generation is losing less and less knowledge. And
it doesn't have to be. I was sharing with some colleagues I was talking about the existential threats to the United States. I think sometimes we get so caught up, and that's another show. But there are real threats to our position in the world in terms of the United States. And education, we're losing the race to education. Some would argue we've lost the race in terms of, STEM, in terms of science. If you just take a look at the reading scores here in Georgia, I mean, a third of the children in our state cannot read on grade level. Mm-hmm. And we know that prisons are built upon third and fourth grade reading levels, but that's a story of a different day. Yeah. If we don't get this right, and money's not necessarily, money's very important. I'm not going to say it's not, but it's not the sole determining factor. If we don't get this education, we don't have another 10 years. It's now. And with AI that's here, Comcast would laid off 30,000 people a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't Comcast. Yeah, maybe I think it was Comcast, but one of the big tech firms. I mean, so we're facing some serious headwinds in this country, and then for those of us who are in terms of our community, if others are facing headwinds, we're facing a tsunami.
Yes, and for reference, I want to point people to Fortune magazine in their February 21st, 2026 article titled "The U.S. Spent $30 billion to ditch textbooks for laptops and tablets. The result is the first generation less cognitively capable than their parents." And it goes on to talk about and citing the source for that is testimony that was given at before the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation by neuroscientist Jared Cooney Horvath. Said that Gen X is less cognitively capable than previous generations, despite its unprecedented access to technology. So this is not just Karen, Kat, and John sitting here having this discussion. Go look up the article, fortune.com. It was published on February 21st, 2026, just this year, where they're talking about the testimony of this neuroscientist based upon the research that has been done. So this is not just us saying it. So I want you guys to go out and look this up. And this is design. This is by design. That's the other thing that I want folks to understand. Like, we're getting rid of whole departments in the Department of Education, and it's being run by someone who has no educational experience, none
at all, zero. And people are okay with that.
And people are okay.
And people are okay with that.
And some people are okay with that. You're right.
Yes. Yeah. But, John, we were talking about, like, what can we do as just the general public? How can we engage? Tell us about some of the initiatives and things that you're working on and what the Urban League is doing in response to the clarion call that we have right now with what's going on.
Well, the first thing that we've done is that we've put together a super coalition of about 20 organizations statewide, some of whom whether it's our Legal Defense Fund or the Southern Education Foundation or the Partnership for Southern Equity or the Coalition for the People's Agenda. We are talking to our partners on a daily basis. We have pooled our resources. We are either at the Capitol fighting for progressive legislation. For example, we got some movement in terms of the governor adjusting the QBE formula that funds schools or in terms of mandatory kindergarten in our state. Or we're on the ground registering people to vote, getting them to the polls in a nonpartisan way, or workshops, seminars, educating our people, talking to our young people. So we realize right now it's all hands on deck. The days of going it alone, that's over now, because the resources, the opposition is so great to what it is that we're doing.
And so well organized, because baby, they weren't new to this, and they were certainly true to this. They worked 50 years to get Roe v. Wade overturned, and trust and believe that Project 2025 didn't just start in in 2025. Like they've been working on this thing for years. And it was Project 2024, Project 2023. So they've been working on that for a while. So,
and if you look at, and when you say working on that, that means putting people in place who will agree from the Supreme Court, the highest law of the land, and you place them how long ago for them to do the things that was implemented
starting in the
today?
lower courts. They started them in the lower courts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of them, some have no judicial experience, but
right.
like,
and to me, it's the people who say something in Congress or in any office, and then those that don't say anything. You know, if you're not going to be in those seats and be consistent and fight for human rights and civil rights and equity, like you said, John, it's not a partisan issue, it's a human issue. Everybody should have the right to vote, to live, to marry, to eat, to have a great quality of education. And we have people on both sides, to me, in all of the decades that's been around, made all these crazy choices where we're here right now. If you would have been, when you had the opportunity to pass the John Lewis bill,
and they didn't. But
and reparations, I mean, and you know, and I know you're gonna ask some more stuff about reparations, but there were opportunities that were missed to stand up and fight for.
Oh, not only missed, you know, undermined by certain members of the Senate who had an ability to do it. I can think of 2 United States senators who, for whatever reason, and they're gone now, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, who we hired to do that. And it was outrageous. I didn't understand the rationale, but they had the position. They had, they could do it. I even
they were the ops. They were the ops.
Well,
I'll say it. You don't have to say it. They were the ops. But yes, I said it. Who's gonna check me, boo? On John, we're talking about things that we can do. There is a rally. Tell us about the rally that's coming up.
Yeah. We have a rally on June 17th at the state capitol, 8:00 in the morning. We're going to assemble at Liberty Plaza, which is right across the street from the Capitol, to push back on redistricting. We have to, not only are we going to make our voices heard at the ballot box, and we did that. We broke records last Tuesday, but now we have to be on the ground. Step two. And, FIFA is going to be in Atlanta, the World Cup, with all the international world looking at Georgia. And we think that's an opportunity to let the world know that of what's going on in the cradle of the civil rights movement and on the 250th anniversary of the founding of this republic. And in which right now, as we speak, there are young men and women right now in uniform defending this country, and it's outrageous that what the administration is doing in the face of this nonsense. So, if you're a citizen, if you care about our republic, as I do, we invite you to come down to your state capitol on June 17th at 8:00 at Liberty Plaza, and come join us in this fight to save our democracy.
All right, I love it. I love it. And so June 17th, 8 a.m., rally against redistricting at the state capitol. That is a Wednesday morning. Let me check my calendar. If I got any cases, I might have to put leave in for that day if I don't have any cases.
And check the Urban League website. We'll have some information on the website. And that's at, Kat, can you first remember? It's been a long day.
Yes.
At www.ulgatl.org. That's www.ulgatl.org, or call the Urban League. Call us directly at 404-659-1150. That's 404-659-1150. We'll see you on the 17th.
Awesome. Yes.
June 17th coming up in June.
Hey, Kat, say that again.
You got something coming up in June?
We do it. Listen, and on June 2nd, we're having a town hall meeting in Atlanta at the Auburn Research Center from 6 to 8. I'll be the moderator on a town hall for reparations. The United Nations recently had took a vote, and unfortunately, the United States and some other nations voted against reparations, but it's on front and center at the United Nations now, and we think that there's a place for reparations against the backdrop of certainly the trauma that happened in this country with our people. So, join me.
So,
was it 5 states, countries?
I'll leave it at that. Well, what I do know, one of the nations was the United States who voted no on that, and I'll leave the rest to our listening audience to draw their own conclusion.
You mean to tell me that I can't get reparations for all 4 of my lines, mom and dad's side, and those lines going back? I can trace all of my lineage into slavery on all of my lines.
Amen.
So my family can't get reparations for the hundreds of years that my family slaved in this country free labor, and made other folks rich. But the January 6 defendants, the criminals who were convicted in a court of law, can partake in $1.776 billion with a B dollars that was recovered payable. We're writing the check for that. Like, the check is coming out of our accounts as U.S. citizens because the president sued his own government that he is the head of. The attorney general signed off on a settlement. So let me back up. The attorney general is Trump's former personal lawyer who sued the United States government and then got appointed as attorney general, signs off on a settlement of a lawsuit that he had been involved in as the personal lawyer. How that's not a conflict, I'll never know. But he approved for the U.S. government to settle for $1.776 billion to go into this fund that was created. And as a part of that, January 6 defendants can access for reparations.
Well, to quote my dad, ain't that a kick in the head? So it's
more than that.
In the words of my dear departed cousin, H. Carl Butler, ain't that nothing? Ain't that nothing? Because that's absolutely what it is. African Americans have been fighting in this country since emancipation for reparations. And it has fallen on deaf ears. So after this fiasco here, I never want to hear one other congressperson or one other person say that we cannot afford it, that this country cannot afford it. Who would we know how to pay? Give it to anybody black. I don't care if they just got here first generation. I don't care. Give it to anybody black. Because if they said wherever they came from, they had hell to pay because of either colonialism, or if they were in somewhere in North America, South America, they were involved in the slavery as well if they're black, because that's how their family got there. So if you're Caribbean, you're South American, you're Canadian, whatever, you get money too.
We still paying for people. Y'all tell me, did we pay for in the Holocaust? Didn't we give reparations?
I know that we gave reparations to the Japanese that were in.
Yeah. I believe in the 80s. I believe in the 80s if there was compensation for that. That's right.
Hiroshima.
So the good news is that there's a precedent for it. How about that?
Yes,
there's a
precedent. Do y'all know that England was still paying out the families, slaveholding families, up until just recently? They were still paying reparations to those slaveholding families for when slavery ended.
And that was,
Yeah.
and the British were, if you remember your history, they abolished slavery before the United States did.
Yeah. 1820s, I believe, wasn't it?
That's 200. Yeah, that's a long time. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So I just say all that to say, when you hear the argument that the U.S. can't afford it, they don't know who they would be able to pay, and why should people who didn't have anything to do with it have to pay reparations? Well, I had nothing to do with January 6th. As a matter of fact, I think we deserve some reparations for the PTSD from sitting there watching this on TV when it happened. Because, I was home minding my business, turn on TV, and I'm watching it live. I'm like, wait a minute, are these people storming the game? So, I still have, I think I need some therapeutic intervention.
I understand. And you are not alone. I'll leave it at that. Amen.
But they're getting reparations. So it's BS when our
reparations and get to run for office too. I'm sorry, girl.
But it is garbage when someone tells you that our government cannot do it, because they have found a way. This president and his appointed cabinet members are finding a way to reward people for bad acts who were complicit in their convictions. So miss me with the we can't afford it, it can't be done.
Right.
Miss me with that.
Right. Somebody always says, if you want to see where a person's priorities lies, look at where they spend their money.
Don't we always say that? Don't we always say that? Look at what their priority. That's how you know what their priorities are. Where do they spend their money? Even when it comes down to your personal finances, right?
That's right.
Where do you spend your money? That's where your priorities are.
That's right.
If you are someone who always has designer bags, designer things, right? Those are your priorities. But yet you don't have life insurance. That's where your priorities are.
And to add to that, I think, John, I always enjoy you. You got so much information, and we can talk for a very long time. We got to definitely have you back before, after your meetings and stuff and the rallies, to give everybody an update. I really do think when we talk about the family unit and where we went wrong, just going back to our ancestors and all of their teachings and upbringings, where we insulate our seniors, our elders. They're the ones that are wise, and they give us all this information and initiate the family as a village. The enemy is division, and that has worked for centuries. As long as you can create light skin against dark skin, you got good hair. Well, the good hair is still attached to my head. I don't care what color it is, and it on the floor. We have to get that closeness back and get that poison out. Like what you just said, where you spend your time, that's where you're gonna spend your money. Where your heart is where you're gonna go. And that's just the bottom line. But no one wants to get involved until it's at your front door.
That's
and
right.
What I believe the three of us are saying today is it's at your front door.
It's in the house.
Your front door.
And you're not the front. They don't kick the door down, Kat. They're standing in your living room looking at you, swearing in the eye.
Right.
And asking you, who gonna check me? What you gonna do?
Right. Who you gonna call? It's truly nothing. And you can no longer say we don't have the money to help. Let me just stick with veterans, with foster care,
right.
Our children that's in need, children that's mentally ill, and people who need assistance to help that family unit to keep kids out of dangerous homes, or get rid with them access to drugs and guns and fentanyl and all that stuff. When you could just drop 7 point some odd billion, where that's coming from? We broke, ain't we? We we got people suffering. We got veterans suffering.
We're just printing money.
Where we got that from? But I feel with all knowing all of that, something has to motivate you enough inside of you. We can't do it.
Mm-mm.
Something has to jump off inside of you,
I agree.
that spark that's going to make you not only protest,
Mm-hmm.
but either vote, educate people on voting, learning, volunteering, be some eyes and ears, attend your local meetings,
That's right.
start writing and
That's
emailing
right.
your elected officials. And then when all that fails, join organizations to help you navigate and learn how to organize,
That's right.
and teach you how to run.
That's right.
A young person said to me in my family, they didn't want to vote because they didn't believe that
Mm.
anything was going to change.
Mm.
said, what am I?
Mm. Amen.
I said, what am I?
Yep. You're right.
What you think I'm doing?
You know.
I'm out of here.
So
Right.
these young people, they losing hope and telling them
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the ancestors died isn't getting it. But I think we need to bring back civil. Let's always be civil. You don't get me going about the Civil War. That's the dumb name in itself. But what's civil about war? But start having these civic engagements at home.
Amen. Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Reconnecting and doing that at home.
Agreed.
Having these
Agreed.
conversations at home.
Agree.
Because we by the time we get to them and say we need your vote, they looking like
Too late.
Yeah.
It's too
they
late.
too
It's too late.
technology, internet resources, division, keeping your mind on stuff that's just poison, from Preston music to all this other stuff. You're not going to be thinking about what's really important because you've been distracted.
That's right. It's
Yes.
too many competing interests, for them.
There are. I want to make 2 points. First off, I misspoke on something. The British government paid 20 million pounds. They took out a loan back in 1833 to pay the 40,000 slave owners.
Mm.
They did not finish paying off that loan until 2018. So I wanted to clarify that and give the correct information. And then secondly, to follow up on what Kat said about speaking to your elected officials, writing, calling. If you don't know who your elected officials are, please go to sos.mvp.ga.gov. What did I flip?
MVP.sos.
Okay. Let's redo that. That is mvp.sos.ga.gov. So go there. You'll put in your name, your first initial, last name, and your date of birth and the county that you live in. And you'll find out who your elected officials are so that you can then contact them.
Call them.
So again, mvp.sos.ga.gov. If you don't get no other piece of information from this show today, find out who your elected officials are.
Mm-hmm.
Start calling, start letter writing. Let them know that you are concerned about what's going on. Join the Urban League and these other organizations on January 17th at the state capitol at 8 o'clock for this rally. And then not only that, another thing that I want to implore upon other people is we talk about, and then also you can get in contact with the Urban League at www.ulgatl.org. And their phone number is 404-659-1150. For folks who have never been involved in the electoral process, I want to challenge you right now that we have the opportunity to turn some things around here in the state of Georgia. I want to charge each of you who are listening to get involved in at least one political campaign. Donate, even if it's $10 and you want to, if you only got $50 and you want to donate $10 to 5 people, donate to a campaign because it takes money to be able to get their message out.
Yeah.
Donate, and I also want you to get involved with somebody's campaigns. If it's nothing but making phone calls, knocking some doors, you need to be the difference. So I don't want to hear that something can't be done,
Mm.
because if you never try, it definitely won't be done.
Mm-hmm.
So, for everyone who's listening and watching, we need you to get engaged. We need you. You understand? Like, you are important. Your existence is important. And this cannot be done without everyone, as many people as possible, to get involved, to get engaged, and to stay engaged. And then once we get our candidates elected, holding them accountable and staying vigilant as what's going on. Don't just wait for the next 4 years or the next 2 years to come around. I'm
And
off
don't
my.
think moving to another country is going to take it away. You can see that this all is global. This is a human experience.
Yeah.
And when one person suffers, we all suffer. And that truly is that. You look at the gas prices over $4 here in Georgia, and gas prices are affecting everybody, not just in the United States, but other countries who rely on the same source. But
Mm-hmm.
before I let you go, brother, always we ask folks, how do you manage your mental health? We want to also break that stigma. So we like folks to share their tools so someone else can benefit from it. So how do you manage and maintain your mental wellness while you have this busy life in community service?
My wife checks me regularly, to be very honest, and she does,
And all good
put the
wife.
phone down, cut off the television. And so for me, I know it's going to sound weird, I like to garden. So I'll go in my backyard and I'll
That's not
plant,
weird at all.
and
That's good.
she has me now planting I don't know, these really frilly flowers, but
You don't know what they are. You just plant them.
hydrangeas and all this other kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
it's good to get connected with nature, to
Mm-hmm.
breathe, to feel the wind and the sun. So that's how I unplug, quite frankly. Just getting reconnected with nature, particularly now since it's the spring. And I would encourage you to do the same.
When I was grieving my parents because they died 3 months apart,
I'm sorry.
when I was grieving them, I gardened. I did container. I had containers all on my back deck and on my porch.
Yes.
Because seeing things grow, and there was something very therapeutic for me in that process. So gardening, it's relaxing, and just seeing things come to life, and that you're the person responsible for watering it and growing, like that was therapy for me. So
me too.
That's some I love that.
Good stuff. Listen, you guys come over to the house for a barbecue.
I know that's right. I'm gonna bring my shovel and some dirt.
Throw some veggies on the grill. I'm there.
That's
I'm
a
there.
Amen. All right, y'all.
So, Kat, you've already asked your last question, and so to our listeners, as always, we ask you to subscribe to Conversations with Karen and Kat on YouTube, Facebook, IG, and wherever you get your podcasts. And remember that you are part of the conversations. Thank you, as always, for joining us on this episode of Conversations with Karen and Kat.
Well, we are impacting the world one conversation at a time.